Hi everyone, this is Neel Raithatha, also known as the Wax Whisperer. Thank you for joining me in my latest video. We have here a patient who attends perennially. They suffer from chronic otitis externa, and as a result they get this accumulation of dead skin, so keratin, that forms into a plug, and given the entrance of the ear in particular is quite narrow, this excessive dead skin turnover is not able to naturally migrate out of the ear, and instead it collects, and this plug of dead skin, keratin, has many different consistencies. So here it's a bit crusty, in the and then more medially it's a lot softer and mushier. So just to the left of the suction probe, you can see it's quite crusty there, and also this section against the canal wall. I'm trying to elevate away. So you would classify probably that as being a class 2. In terms of consistency. So I uploaded and shared the modified Rye Bristol Ceremon chart based on the famous Bristol stool chart, where type 1 impaction of wax is the driest form and it's high in keratin content, whereas type 7 is your very loose, wet, almost liquid state earwax, which is high in lipid content. So here there's different consistencies along the plug itself of keratin, and so there's an opening at the roof of the ear canal, and because this was so adhesive, I thought, let me get the Rye correct. You can see I can glide it really deep, but as I was extracting it, the patient found it really uncomfortable, and I wasn't in contact with the canal walls. You can see that there, I was right in the middle. And so I stopped using the Rye correct as a result. And I can only think, as I was bringing it forwards, you can see like that we weren't in contact with the canal at all. You can see the keratin at the base there. So it would have just been that some of these adhesions are quite strongly attached to the canal side walls, and as I was bringing it through, you could feel it coming away. So you can see this is really dry. This is a kind of a class 2, type 2. It's really crusty. And so patients who suffer from chronic otitis externa. So otitis externa is an umbrella term given for an infection or inflammation of the outer ear. Just to remind you a bit of the anatomy of the ear. So the outer ear consists of the pinna. The pinna is also known as the auricle. So the auricle is the flap of cartilage that we all have on either side of our heads. And the term pinna actually is Latin for fin or wing, so that's where the name comes from. And connected to the pinna, you have the external auditory meatus, more commonly known as the ear canal, and that's the auditory tube, the acoustic tube. It bridges the pinna, the auricle, to the eardrum. So the eardrum is the final stage of the outer ear, and the eardrum, it's 3-ply thick. The outermost layer, called a cuticular stratum, is made up of the same skin that lines the inner 2/3 of the ear canal, the bony part, and that's called stratified, so layers. Squamous, so squamous is flat skin cells, almost like fish scales. Keratinized, so these skin cells produce keratin. Epithelial, which is the outermost layer of skin, and the middle layer of the eardrum is called the fibrous stratum. That's made up of fibrous connective tissue, and then you got the innermost layer of the eardrum, the mucosal layer, the mucosa stratum. So that's the outer ear. So the outermost layer of the eardrum, the first ply, is also considered part of the outer ear. So the function of the pinna, the auricle, there's debates on whether it actually helps channel sounds into the ear, and the research is not very supportive of that concept. Unlike in other animals where the pinna, the auricle, is very much involved in channeling sounds into the ear itself. So you're thinking more about your prey animals. So they're on the lookout from their predators. So they do use their auricle, the pinna, to channel sound waves into the ear so that it can be heard. In humans, it's not as clear cut as that. And there's a study, what they did. So the rationale behind the pinna being able to channel sounds in is these flaps, these folds and creases that we have, these irregular shapes and modules that we have on the surface of the pinna. And it was hypothesized that these help channel sounds into the ear, but a study filled in those little folds and creases using earwax. Now, I'm hoping it's the patient's own earwax or some artificial wax and not harvested wax from other people. So they essentially filled in these folds and creases and see if that affected the channeling of sound into the ear, and they found limited evidence. Instead, the auricle, the outer part of the ear, is more involved in amplification. So the main bowl in the pinna, the auricle, that's called the concha, and that's got a resonant frequency of around, I think, 5 or 6 kilohertz. And what I mean by resonant frequency, if you have a sound wave traveling to the ear in that frequency range, 5 to 6 kilohertz, because of the shape and size of the concha, that itself starts to vibrate in response to the sound wave. So when the concha vibrates, it is itself producing sound waves. So that provides an amplification. So that's what we call the resonant frequency of the concha. And it's around the magnitude, I think, of around 10 decibels, so it's quite significant. Then you've got the folds at the top of the ear, that's called the pinna flange, and that has like a natural resonance of around 4 kilohertz and increases sound waves by 3 decibels. So in total, your outer ear, the auricle, can amplify high frequency sounds, which are more involved in the intelligibility of speech, up to, say, between 10 and 13 decibels. So it's quite significant. Another function of the auricle is believed to be sound localization, and it does that in 2 ways. So you have front back localization. So if you've got a sound arriving from behind you, your pinna, your auricle acts as a shield. It's going to absorb some of the sound waves before it enters the ear. Typically higher frequency sound waves, because you want the sound waves. So low frequency sounds have a longer wavelength, so they will just travel around the auricle, the pinna, whereas the high frequency sounds, they have a shorter wavelength, so they will actually bump into the auricle on its journey into the ear because it's got a shorter wavelength. So this front back localization only works for high frequency sounds. So if you've got high frequency sound coming from behind you, it's going to be, some of it's going to be reflected, and similarly, if you've got a high frequency sound coming in front of you, then it's going to be amplified, as I just explained. It gets amplified by the concha and the pinna itself. So from behind, you have a pinna shadowing effect, or a pinna shielding effect, and in front of you have a pinna boost effect. So the way you're able to localize sounds, imagine you've got a bird chirping from behind you and a bird chirping from in front of you. They're going to sound different because the bird chirping from in front, you're going to get more high frequency content in their chirping. In contrast, the bird chirping from behind you, you're going to get a different, you're still going to hear the chirp, but it's going to be a different timbre, a different note. You're going to miss some of the higher frequencies. So based on that information, your brain will be able to locate sounds. The other type of localization is what we call vertical localization. That's when you're able to decipher where sounds are coming from above and below you. Now, because we're not birds and we're not suspended in midair, that effect may be limited, but if you've got sounds, so when sounds come to your ear, sorry I'm kind of diverging a bit, but it's just, I think it'd be interesting for you guys to listen to this, because, I've been reading some of the comments the last few days, and I think a lot of people watch the channel for the educational side, so sorry I'm diverging. So you have vertical localization. So when sounds arrive at the ear, they've got 2 entry routes. They can either go directly into the ear canal, or they partially get reflected, so they bounce off the pinna before entering the ear. So as I said, you've got 2 sound routes. Now, sounds that enter the ear directly are going to be transmitted quicker to the eardrum, and sounds that reflect off the pinna, they're going to be a slight delay. And that slight delay can cause what we call phase cancellation. Now, what I mean by phase cancellation, and again, the reason why I'm discussing this is I know there's a lot of audiologist students possibly watching this, And this is an important part of audiology, this phase cancellation. So hopefully I can do the explanation justice. So imagine you've got a sound wave. So sound waves, you have these ups and downs, these positive peaks, amplitudes, and negative amplitudes. And imagine you've got this continuous sound wave. Imagine you've got the same sound wave, but whereas sound wave 1, you have the positive peaks at a particular point in the sound wave. And sound wave 2, conversely to the positive peak, you have sound wave 2 that has the negative amplitude peak. So it's the same sound wave, but in the opposite phase. And that has a cancelling effect. So if you've got two sound waves and they are in the same trajectory, so all the positive peaks and negative peaks are aligned between the two sound waves of the same frequency, you're going to have an amplification of that sound. But if you have two sound waves, so they're of the same frequency, but one sound wave is so with sound wave 1, the peak phase of the sound wave is corresponding to the negative peak of sound wave 2, then they're going to have a cancelling effect. So when sounds enter the ear, because of that slight delay, it can cause this phase cancellation effect where actually sounds around 10 kilohertz are reduced by the pinna. It has a cancelling effect to that magnitude where if you're hearing a sound from either above or below you, it has the potential of being muted before it enters the ear. And that information allows the ear to kind of gauge whether the sounds are coming from above and below you. So that phase cancellation, it's called a pinna notch. So that reduction in sound at 10 kilohertz is called a pinna notch. And yeah, it's more susceptible for sound waves coming from up above and below you. So I suspect those angles cause the sound to either directly enter the ear or it has to bounce off the pinna before it enters the ear. So that's the function of the pinna. In essence, it also helps to protect the eardrum. So the pinna itself, you've got all these landmarks. And the most probably common landmark is I think the lobule, the lower part, the fatty part. People have loads of lobule piercings. That's a quite common one. But the piece of triangular cartilage just in front of your ear canal entrance, the tragus. Now mine doesn't cover my ear canal entrance, but for a lot of people it does, and that's believed to have provide a bit of protection. So if you've got any foreign body going into the ear, so I think I mentioned a few weeks ago that a good friend of mine, his toddler, unbeknown to him, got a thermometer, an oral thermometer, and poked it in his ear, and it severely perforated it. And I've got some good news. I'm going to try to upload that in the next few days, but I saw him a few weeks ago, and the perforation had significantly healed. I was really, really surprised. And he attended again on Monday, and that perforation's now completely healed. And in fact, you just wouldn't know he's got a perforation. Now, sometimes when I'm going to diverge now. Sometimes when a patient has a perforation, it's very visible even when it's healed. And that's because, as I mentioned before, your eardrum has got 3 membranes. It's 3 ply thick. When you've got a perforation, all 3 layers are damaged, they're perforated. And if that perforation heals, then it's only the outer layer, so the cuticular stratum layer, and the innermost layer, the mucosal stratum layer, that re-heals. The middle fibrous stratum layer, also known as the lamina propria, that doesn't heal. So that healed section of the eardrum, it's going to appear thinner because instead of 3 layers, you've got 2 layers. And we call that a monomeric eardrum. So it's paradoxically termed. You would have thought it would be called dimeric because it's got 2 layers. But no, we have to make it complicated for ourselves. It's called a monomeric eardrum. So quite often when patients have a previous perforated eardrum and it's healed, we can identify that because we can see a thinning of that section of the eardrum. But my friend, he has got no thinning whatsoever. So it's possible that his middle layer has somehow healed. It was quite close to the. It wasn't a central perf. It was more to the posterior region. So possibly because of the location, it's got a bit more blood supply. It's had a chance to. The middle layer is also potentially healed, but I will upload that video. So So we talked about the eardrum. How did I get onto the eardrum? I don't know. I forget. So the ear canal itself, that has also its own resonance frequency. So the ear canal, most commonly in adult patients, it has a resonant frequency of around 2.5 to 3.5 kilohertz, and it can be up to 10 to 15 decibels. So what we mean by that is when a sound wave enters your ear between 2.5 and 3.5 kilohertz, it causes the ear canal itself to vibrate in response to that sound. And when it vibrates itself, it emits a sound wave in that same frequency, which then boosts the overall sound frequency. So if you've got a longer than average ear canal, then your resonant frequency is going to be a lower frequency. And for children, they have a higher resonant frequency because they've got a shorter ear canal. So the primary function of the auditory canal, the external auditory meatus, is again amplification. The eardrum itself has a really, really important role in amplification. So the eardrum is connected to three bones: the ossicles, the hammer bone, also known as the malleus, the anvil, also known as the incus, and the stapes, also known as the stirrup bone. And when the hammer bone itself is connected to the eardrum via the umbo, the central part of the hammer bone, you'll always see that in the videos. It's the center of the eardrum. You can see the bone connected to it, and that where the bone connects to the eardrum in the center, it actually pulls the eardrum inward slightly. So the eardrum itself, when you're looking at it via the entrance of the ear canal, it's concave, it's conical in shape. The center bit is pushed inwards, and also the eardrum is obliquely orientated. So in the case of the right ear here, the top left section of the eardrum is closer to us than the bottom right section, which is more positioned deeper in the ear. So it's tilted obliquely. And because that center part of the eardrum is also pulled inwards, it's a conical shape. If you're looking at the eardrum from inside the middle ear towards the entrance, we call that a convex eardrum. So the pointed bit is coming towards us, but in this case, that depressed part is going away from us. So that center part is because of the umbo, it's connected, and then connected to the malleus, you've got the incus and then the stapes. And the stapes, the smallest bone in the body, that is connected to the cochlea, the organ of hearing, okay, which looks like a snail. And the cochlea is full of two types of fluid, perilymph fluid and endolymph fluid. They have different opposite ionic electrolyte compounds. And contained within the organ of hearing, the cochlea, you have sensory hair cells. They're called outer hair cells. They're mainly involved in the further amplification of sounds. Then you've also got some inner hair cells. So they code for really loud sounds, and they also help to transmit electrical converted energy to the brain via the auditory nerve. But the cochlea is full of fluid, and fluid has greater inertia than air. So basically all the sound that we're hearing up to the organ of hearing, the cochlea, is travelling through air. But then that sound has to then travel through fluid, so it needs additional amplification to do that, because fluid's going to absorb a lot of that sound. So we call that an impedance mismatch. And so the pinna, by boosting the sounds at the higher frequencies, as I mentioned, the ear canal itself also has an amplification effect. These all are preparing the sound wave to travel through that fluid, because we need more energy. And the eardrum itself does that. So the eardrum is 17 times larger than the point in the ear where the stirrup bone, the stapes bone, connects to the organ of hearing. We call that the oval window. So the stapes bone is connected to the oval window, and in response to sound waves, the eardrum vibrates, these bones vibrate, and that stapes bone, it's almost like a hydraulic action. It moves in and out of the organ of hearing almost at that oval window. And that hydraulic action causes fluid that I just described in the cochlea to then travel in waves. And the waves they depend on the frequency of sound. So we call that tonotopic. At the entrance of the the cochlea. They code for the higher frequency sounds, and the further down you travel down the cochlea, which is like a spiral, like a snail, it's got 2.5 bends at the apex, at the very tip, so the furthest point away from the entrance, that codes for the low frequency sounds. So when you've got high frequency sounds, the sound waves are going to travel in such a way that they're going to stimulate the sensory hair cells at the entrance of the ear canal. And because the sound is fluid waves, we need more energy. So the eardrum, because it's 17 times larger than the oval window, you're transferring the same sound energy to a smaller surface area, which increases the pressure. So the smaller the surface area, the increased pressure. So the eardrum also assists in the impedance mismatch. And so do the ossicles. So the ossicles, they move in tandem, like a lever system, and that lever system also adds to amplification. So it's just a very, very unique system. So the way the ear works as a whole, the hearing pathway, so sound waves are acoustic energy. So acoustic energy is amplified by the pinna, and it's transported through the external auditory meatus, where it also undergoes further amplification. These acoustic sound waves then hit the eardrum. So when at that point, that acoustic energy is converted into mechanical energy. So the reason why it's mechanical energy is because the eardrum is mechanically vibrating. This mechanical energy is then being transmitted through the ossicles, the 3 bones in the lever system, which causes the ossicles to themselves vibrate. And then where the stapes bone connects to the cochlea via the oval window, at that stage we call it aqua hydraulic energy. So aqua because we've got fluid in the cochlea, and hydraulic is because that stapes bone really does work like a hydraulic system. It's going forwards and backwards, causing fluid pressure changes and waves to form within the cochlea. So then you've got this aqua hydraulic energy, which then travels over these sensory hair cells. And when they travel over these sensory hair cells, they shear side to side, and they also contract. And when they contract, the aqua hydraulic energy is converted into electrical chemical energy. So when these little sensory hair cells contract, they allow potassium, for example, to enter, which then causes an electrical innovation. You get an electrical stimulus being created. And this electrical stimulus is then transported up the 8th cranial nerve, the auditory nerve, also known as the cochlear vestibular nerve, or the vestibular cochlear nerve. So it contains not only the hearing nerve, but the balance nerve that travels up the brainstem to the brain. Now, if you're right-handed, the auditory cortex is on your left side. So that's where speech is predominantly processed. But on the opposite side, the right side, is where tones are processed, so music, for example. Now, if your right ear is actually connected to the left side of your brain and your left ear is connected to the right side of the brain. So if you're hearing speech from your left ear, that speech is initially transported to the right hemisphere of your brain. However, because it's speech, it then needs to be transported to the left hemisphere of the brain. So it has an additional journey, and the right and left hemispheres of the brain are connected by a structure called the corpus callosum. And so sound, if it's speech in your left ear, it's first of all transported to the right hemisphere of the brain where tones are normally processed. So it has to go this additional journey to the left hemisphere. However, if you're right-handed, this is again typically if you're right-handed, if speech is being heard on your right side, it goes directly to the left hemisphere of the brain where it needs to be. So we call that the right ear advantage. So a lot of people who are right-handed, they actually hear better speech from their right ear compared to the left side. And that could be different in left-handed people. And it also can be, auditory training can kind of sometimes change that. So if you're a musician, you're right-handed, there can be variation in that mechanism I've just described. Okay, so I'll go back to the video, guys. So we've cleared all that debris. I'm giggling because I've just talked about the ear. And, as you can probably tell, I really am passionate about what I do. I enjoy what I do. And the reason for me to recite all this as well is because I do training sessions. I need to always keep my knowledge up. And the only way you keep your knowledge up is by, this knowledge, we learn it at university, but you need to then apply it. And by me talking about it, it also reinforces my own understanding and knowledge, which is useful for me as well. So thank you guys for listening. Hopefully not bored you too much. Now, guys, it's been a bit less on this channel, but I've got another YouTube channel, the Clearwax one, where I upload videos of the Waxscope. There's been a few trolls on that, and you know what? I'm just going to start blocking them. It's quite satisfying, actually. I've blocked a few already. So if you're one of these people that are going to be negative Nelly and, it's just going to, be horrible for no reason, then I'm just going to block you. So I might miss you the first few times because I'm not going to search every single comment, but if something jumps out at me, I'm just going to, you can't, I don't know with YouTube if you can block, it's like you hide user from the channel. I don't know if that is the same as block, but anyway, you won't be able to leave any more comments. So I did a few today and I thought, okay, it's quite satisfying, quite enjoyed that. So we're just mopping up the entrance here. You're going to see the plug of keratin that I removed from this side is a still image. And this is a class, probably class 2, so it's sausage-like, but it's lumpy and it's got a high keratin input. So there's a lot more keratin in there, probably like 70% in comparison to lipids. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Take care, keep well, and speak soon. Bye.